What if I were to tell you that in 1982, a young, attractive woman went missing and was later found dead after hitchhiking? You probably wouldn't be too shocked, seeing that throughout the 1970s and 1980s, there were numerous cases of men and women hitchhiking, only to become victims of some depraved killer. But what if I were to tell you that on one single day in 1982, not one, but two young, attractive women went missing and were later found dead after hitchhiking from the same relative area? Now, would that catch your attention? This is Storytime, and I'm your host, Morgan. January 6th, 1982 was a bitterly cold Wednesday night in Breckenridge, Colorado, with temperatures dropping to 20 below zero. What the residents of this small skiing town at the base of the Rocky Mountains 10-mile range did not know was that on this night there was a killer amongst them, out brazenly hunting his prey. The day had started out well for 29-year-old Bobbi Jo Oberholtzer. He had just been promoted to office manager at a real estate development company in Breckenridge, and had met her friends Char McKesson and Dan Carey at the village pub after work to celebrate her good fortune. By 7:30 p.m., it was apparent that her friends had decided to make it a night of it, but Bobbi Jo was getting tired and hungry and wanted to go home. At around 7:50 p.m., Bobbi Jo bundled up and headed for the Minute Mart, a convenience store at the end of town on Highway 9, whose parking lot was used by locals as a pickup spot for hitchhikers headed south. He was last seen by witnesses alone near the Minute Mart, about 100 yards from the pub entrance, hitchhiking southbound out of town. Shortly before 8 p.m., a friend driving a truck spotted Bobbi Jo standing in the cold and offered to give her a ride, but she declined his offer because he wasn't traveling all the way to Alma. As he drove away, he was unaware that when he looked into his rearview mirror at Bobbi Jo stamping her feet in the snow, it would be the last time anyone saw her alive. According to her husband Jeff, Bobbi Jo had called at a little past 6 p.m. to let him know that she would be home late. Shortly after the call from Bobbi Jo, a friend by the name of Joe Urban stopped by to see Jeff, who was just finishing shoveling snow. Times had been tough for Joe. He told Jeff that he was thinking about heading to Denver to hawk his watch for gas and oil. Jeff suggested they go instead to the local gas station to make a trade. The station's owner wasn't interested in Joe's watch, so Jeff charged gas and oil for his friend and bought a 6-pack of beer from the liquor store next to the gas station. The pair went back to Jeff's where they drank the beer and watched television. When Joe left at about 8 p.m., Jeff continued watching a movie, although he was getting increasingly upset at his wife for not calling to say that she was going to be later than expected. Eventually, Jeff fell asleep on the couch with the television on. At around midnight, Jeff was startled awake by a passing ambulance and found that Bobbi had not yet returned home. By 2 a.m., Jeff knew something was wrong because the bars were closed and Bobbi Jo wasn't home. At 2:45 that morning, he banged on the door of Char McKesson, who was supposed to have given his wife a ride home. He was told that they had last seen Bobbi Jo when she left the bar between 7:30 and 8 p.m. Jeff jumped in his truck and headed to Breckenridge to search for his wife. In Breckenridge, he went to the realty office to see if maybe she had decided at the last minute to spend the night on the couch. But the office was dark and nobody answered his knock. At about 3:30 a.m., torn between fear and anger, Jeff contacted the Breckenridge police. The dispatcher took a missing persons report and promised he'd get the word out to the other patrol officers. Jeff spent the rest of the night driving, trying to think of where his wife might have gone. When he finally decided to head home in hopes that Bobbi Jo would be there with a tale of some misadventure she'd had, he found that the house was cold and empty. Jeff sat down to think about his options. When the telephone rang at 9 a.m. that morning, it startled Jeff out of his stupor. The call was from Donald Hamilton, a rancher who lived near the town of Como off of U.S. Highway 285, roughly 10 miles northeast of where it intersects with Highway 9 in the town of Fairplay. Mr. Hamilton told Jeff that he had just found Bobbi Jo's driver's license in his backyard. A search of Mr. Hamilton's backyard uncovered the remainder of the contents of Bobbi's wallet, although the wallet itself was never found. Searchers soon located Bobbi Jo's backpack 4 miles from the Hamilton Ranch, along the southeast side of U.S. Highway 285, to the east of Fairplay. 3 significant items were recovered together approximately 30 feet off the highway, lying on top of the snow in an open field. These 3 items consisted of Bobbi Jo's backpack and some of its contents, her blood-stained wool glove, and a blood-stained tissue. It appeared to investigators that Bobbi's belongings had been tossed out of a car window as the vehicle sped towards Denver. At 3 p.m. that afternoon, the body of Bobbi Jo Oberholtzer was discovered lying face down in a snowbank near the summit of Hoosier Pass, approximately 10 miles south of Breckenridge and 15 miles northwest of where her backpack was discovered off of US 285. Her body was about 300 feet south of the parking lot at the top of the pass and 20 feet off the southbound lane of Highway 9. A single orange sock was found nearby. Evidence at the scene indicated that Bobbi Jo may have gotten out of the suspect's vehicle at the parking lot of the summit. Her keyring, with a metal hook defensive type weapon made for her by her husband, was found in the parking lot at the summit. Bobbi Jo appeared to have begun running downhill along the road before she was shot with a grazing bullet that struck her right breast. A second Winchester hollow point copper bullet struck her in the chest. Her tracks showed that she had gone over the snow embankment toward a stand of trees, stopping short of the trees and then backtracking to near the spot where she was shot in the back from a distance of only a foot or 2. She collapsed on her back and slid down the snow a short distance before coming to a rest where she froze or bled to death. A pair of 18-inch plastic tie wraps were found on one wrist, suggesting that someone had attempted to bind Bobbi Jo. The body showed no signs of sexual assault. Earlier in the day on January 6th, another hitchhiker had taken the same route to get home. He also picked up a ride on Highway 9 and was trying to reach her home in Blue River, just outside of Breckenridge. 21-year-old Annette Schnee had 2 jobs. In the daytime, she worked at the Holiday Inn in Frisco, and her evening job was as a bartender at Flipside Bar, part of the Beaver Run complex in Breckenridge. She had been sick for a few days and had left her job at the Holiday Inn early on January 6th. Because she wasn't feeling well. She went to the medical center in Frisco and then got a ride to Breckenridge, where she made her last known stop to have a prescription filled at a pharmacy called the drugstore at approximately 4:45 p.m. Annette was accompanied by an unkempt but otherwise pretty woman with dark shoulder-length hair. The pharmacy clerk recognized Annette, but not her companion. While investigators believed she knew the unidentified woman, the clerk would later tell detectives that they didn't quite seem to belong together. While checking out, Annette was heard reminding the woman that she wanted to buy cigarettes, which was paid for by Annette. The cigarettes and prescriptions were Annette's only purchases at the store. Annette never showed up for her 8 p.m. shift at the Flipside Bar at Beaver Run that evening. The uniform was at her home and was never picked up. Annette was described as very reliable, and it's thought that she may have been headed home to get ready for work when she disappeared. Nearly 6 months after Annette Schnee went missing, her body was discovered by a 9-year-old boy face down in the knee-deep water of Sacramento Creek, lying partly on the bank against a willow tree in early July of 1982. The location of her body was approximately 20 miles south of Breckenridge and 10 miles south of the Hoosier Pass summit. The location where the body was found was remote, about 3 miles west of Highway 9. Her body was fully clothed, but the clothes were in disarray. It seemed to indicate that someone had raped her and then dressed her. It also appeared that the body had been frozen and had thawed. Annette was wearing shoes on both feet. On her right foot, she had on a long striped sock. And on the left foot, investigators discovered that Annette was wearing the match of the orange bootie found near Bobbi Jo's body. Her other striped sock was found inside a bloody hooded sweatshirt. The cold water in which Annette's body was submerged allowed enough preservation for her autopsy, although testing for signs of sexual assault could not be completed. She had been shot in the back, and while the bullet went through her, it was never found, but authorities believe it could have been a .38 or .357 caliber bullet. 2 months after Annette's body was found, her backpack was found near Hoosier Pass, in a location near where Bobbi Jo was killed. Inside her backpack, investigators found her wallet, which included a photograph of an unidentified man. Investigators believe that the same person or persons were responsible for killing both women, although there is no proof that the two had ever known each other. They also believe the murderer was someone familiar with the mountains, because the remote area of where Annette's body was found was near a well-known makeshift firing range locals frequented. So who killed Bobbi Jo and Annette? Could it have been Bobbi Jo's husband? A spurned lover? Or just maybe, it was a serial killer. When interviewed by police, Jeff Oberholtzer denied knowing Annette Schnee. A few days later, after seeing a picture of Annette in the newspaper, Jeff admitted to having picked her up once while she was hitchhiking and that he gave her his business card. Police did in fact find Jeff's business card in her wallet. Since both victims were associated or known by one individual, it made the investigation focus on Jeff as a primary suspect. 2 months after his wife was murdered, Jeff took a polygraph exam and passed. From day one, Jeff insisted that he had a rock-solid alibi. He said that at the time of the murders were committed, he was at home visiting with a friend, but Jeff was unable to produce the witness for the police. Finally, in December of 1990, Jeff's friend, Joe Urban, surfaced. Jeff was under suspicion in the murders for about 10 years, but was finally cleared by the Summit County Sheriff's Department after conducting DNA tests. So if it wasn't Jeff, who else could it have been? At least 4 serial killers were in Summit County or passed through the area in 1982. And one by one, they've been checked off the suspect list. In late 1983, Summit County Sheriff's investigator Tom Flores received a tip that Henry Lee Lucas, who had confessed to hundreds of murders across the country, had admitted to killing a woman in Colorado in 1982, and several other Colorado women while crisscrossing the nation with his former lover, Otis Elwood Toole. While Lucas was convicted of murder in Texas, he later recanted other murders. For many years, besides Jeff Oberholtzer, the other primary suspect in the case was Thomas Edward Luther, who had been convicted in the February 1982 sexual assault of Mary Brown in Silverthorne, Colorado, roughly 14 miles north of Breckenridge. Mary, a 21-year-old woman who had just been dropped off by a Trailways bus in a laundromat parking lot that served as a bus depot in Frisco. She had arrived from Denver and was expecting to be given a ride by friends to the Silverthorne condominium that she was sharing with them for a ski vacation, but they were nowhere to be found. Despite some initial hesitation, Mary accepted a ride from Thomas Luther, who offered to help her locate her friends in Silverthorne. After aimlessly driving around the Silverthorne area, Thomas Luther turned onto a dead-end street surrounded by deep snow. There he began to physically and sexually assault Mary. Despite this vicious attack, which left Mary naked and beaten, Thomas Luther did not kill her. After stopping the attack, Luther sat motionless, looking down at his bloody hands. He began driving again, but only drove a few feet before stopping again and allowing Mary to leave. After finding help in a nearby home, Silverthorne police were able to quickly locate Thomas Luther at his trailer home in Frisco that he shared with his girlfriend, Sue Potter. He was taken into custody without incident. When questioning his girlfriend, she indicated that she had a loaded .38 caliber police revolver under her pillow, a revolver which would have been similar to the type that was used in the murders of Bobbi Jo and Annette. While in jail awaiting trial, he boasted to other inmates that he had killed Bobbi Jo and Annette. In May 1982, an inmate at Summit County Jail approached a deputy about information he had about Thomas Luther, who would later claim that his information was regarding the murder of 2 women, one of whom Luther had left lying face down in a stream. Detectives were sure it was Luther who committed the murders, but there wasn't enough evidence to take the case to trial. No physical evidence tied him to the murder scenes, and when investigators interviewed him, he denied involvement. Then, in 1993, Luther was charged for the murder of Cher Elder, who was shot in the head and dumped. Luther had cut off her ring finger and lips because she threatened to expose an illegal sports card ring connected to him. The following year, Luther was convicted in West Virginia in the rape of a 38-year-old Virginia woman. In each of Luther's convictions, he attacked women who resembled his mother, who abused him, prosecutors have said. Around that same time, investigators' biggest break came with improvements to DNA testing that changed their thoughts about Bobbi Jo's glove and a tissue, both stained with blood. Detectives had originally believed the blood was Bobbi Jo's because it matched her blood type. However, DNA testing revealed that the blood was neither Bobbi Jo's nor Annette's, but instead came from a male. In fighting back, Bobbi Jo likely drew blood from her attacker. Investigators were convinced that the blood would link Luther to the crime and be the key evidence leading to his conviction, but his DNA did not match. One theory is that Luther was with someone that night, and that the blood is that of the accomplice. But when they tested the DNA of a friend of Luther's from Vermont, who had been with Luther in Colorado, there was no match. Luther remains a suspect, but detectives believe in all likelihood the culprit is someone else. Since then, they've tested 8 or 9 specific people who had close relationships with the women or were considered suspects. Some people offered to be tested, while investigators obtained search warrants for others. One other suspect who has drawn the interest of investigators is Tracy Petrocelli. Petrocelli was previously on death row in Nevada after killing a man during a cross-country spree with stops in Colorado. He continues to be a suspect, even though his blood doesn't match that of the killers. Petrocelli, who began his spree by fatally shooting a girlfriend in front of a large crowd outside a Seattle bar, picked up accomplices as he stole cars from dealerships in Oklahoma, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, and California. In Thornton, Colorado, Petrocelli and an unidentified accomplice test drove a car from a local dealership. During the drive, the accomplice, seated in the back, shot the car salesman, but did not kill him. Man later identified Petrocelli. When police questioned Petrocelli about the crime, he told them the only town he stayed in was Breckenridge, where he stayed overnight at a hotel. The hotel he named was the Holiday Inn in Frisco, the one where Annette had been working. Petrocelli denied killing Annette, but investigators have said that it's possible the blood found on Bobbi Jo's wool glove may have been that of Petrocelli's missing partner, who has never been found. Petrocelli was arrested and later convicted of killing James Wilson, a Nevada car salesman, while he was test driving a Volkswagen pickup, according to Nevada appeals court records. When stopped in Nevada, he had the identifications of 3 men, who are all missing and believed dead. Although Petrocelli and Luther both remain suspects, most members of the 11th Judicial District Homicide Task Force believe that someone else killed the women, likely someone who was familiar with the rural road Annette's body was found. It has been over 37 years, and we are still asking, who killed Annette and Bobbi Jo? This has been Storytime, and I'm your host, Morgan.